Hello everybody and welcome to Chess 24 and welcome to my game of the day for round 11 of the Tata Steel Chess Masters section. Today was a very interesting day because we're getting towards the end of the tournament. It's round 11, 3 games left only. With Wesley So out in front by a full point, there is a chasing pack of players, one of whom is perhaps the most, let's say, pressurized in some sense because there's so much expectation on his shoulders, and that's the young Chinese player Wei Yi, only 17 years old. But is this going to be his breakout tournament? We'll soon see. He, prior to this game, was on 6 points, so he was sharing his position with Magnus Carlsen, and I think there were 5 players actually on 6 points, a full point behind Wesley on 7. So it was a very important round for Wei Yi, and he had a very tough task ahead of him playing against Sergei Karjakin, the super solid, very experienced Grandmaster, of course, despite only being 25 years old, just fought for the World Championship crown against Carlsen. So this was a very interesting matchup. Both players still had expectations to make a push for the tournament, make a push for the first position. So without further ado, let's actually see what happened. Wei Yi, with the white pieces, began with e4, and we actually got a Berlin defense, something that we are fully accustomed to. Nowadays, it has arguably taken over the main line with 3a6 as the defense of the elite players being shown to be extremely solid and reliable. And in this position, Wei Yi decides to play the so-called anti-Berlin for d3. Of course, the main line Berlin being the line with the queen exchange, like so, which is still seen from time to time, but Black has shown that he has a number of resources to make White's task of winning this extremely difficult. So Wei Yi, much to his style I should say, keeps the pieces on. He's a very dynamic player. He likes positions with a lot of initiative. And with the queens off so early, I think he would struggle against somebody like Karjakin to really cause him problems. So, Karjakin played the move bishop c5 here, and now Wei Yi played very common move c3. In this position, if White castles, amongst other things, Black can play the move knight d4, so c3 is really seen as a more flexible option, and now Black castles. And once again, we reach a position where White's got many moves. Castles is a very well-known and very logical way to develop, after which many ideas have been played, rook e8, d6, and so on and so forth. But actually, what's really curious about this game is Wei Yi decides to take on c6 in this particular position. Now, this is actually a very logical move as well, because after the move b takes e6, White can now grab a pawn in the center. This hasn't been played so much at top level because it was shown that Black can generate a lot of counterplay very quickly, having the 2 bishops and having his king castled already. And he does that by playing the move pawn to d5. Very, very standard idea, opening up the center while the king is there. A move like e takes d5 would be met by queen takes d5, which would be more than sufficient for Black. The knight's on pre, the pawn's on pre. Obviously, if the knight comes back, rook e8 check is a disaster for White. The bishop is also coming out to a6 in many lines. So after d5, really White's only option is to play the move pawn to d4 here. Sergei dropped his bishop back to b6, and once again White decided to castle. If you take the pawn on d5, something similar to the previous variation can happen. Queen takes d5. Yes, now white can castle covering g2, but after c5, this very important pawn break really gives black at least full equality. The bishop finds beautiful activity along one of these diagonals, and white can't really keep his center. So instead of this, Wei Yi just decides to castle and give the pawn back. And we reach a really, really interesting moment here where Karjakin makes a very uncharacteristic decision, in my opinion. He plays the move d takes e4. Not necessarily a bad move, but certainly not Sergei's style. I think were the tournament situation different and the match, let's say he were playing a long match, I think he would not hesitate with playing knight takes e4. The idea being, again, this knight takes c6 idea can be met by this c-pawn rip whenever the knight retreats back. And also, if white plays a move like knight d2, black, once again, never really has any major problems here. He can take. Yeah, you can claim white's okay, but once again, c5 looks like a very sensible move to me. So black should really never have any problems in this line. But d takes e4 is a clear intention from Sergei to mix things up. He wants to get a very unbalanced position, especially pawn structure-wise. But this comes with its own risks. And Wei Yi played very quickly the move bishop g5. I like this move. Makes a lot of sense. Pinning the knight and also preparing the move knight to d2 and knight takes e4. So this pin is slightly awkward. Another feature of a lot of these variations. And here Sergei played c5. Very typical, we've seen. But this does allow the move knight to d2. And indeed, knight takes e4 is coming. And again, question is, can Sergei play a move like bishop b7, holding on to that pawn? Possibly. There are probably a fair few moves to consider. h6 as well is always a move to consider, even if you have to take back with the g-pawn. There are a lot of moves. But perhaps, rather surprisingly, Sergei decides to take on d4, allowing knight takes e4, and then took on c3. This whole sequence of moves, for me, feels a bit suspect. Sergei neglects the pressure thanks to this pin. And it was here where Wei Yi, I believe, had a 45-minute think, so a really long think, but his decision is totally justified because this position is purely based on concrete analysis. There are various types of positions in chess where sometimes you can go by instinctive feel. There are some very obvious positional moves, but this is exactly the kind of position which requires calculations of long lines and long forcing lines a lot of the time. So after a long think, Wei Yi played the best move, queen to f3, simply threatening carnage on f6. And there's no real way for black to counter this. If he takes on b2, well, clearly knight takes f6 in this position, attacking the queen and threatening a checkmate down the g-file is insufficient. So Sergei Karjakin played the only move, bishop b7. But here Wei Yi played the move bishop takes f6, forcing the move bishop takes e4. Again, g takes f6, knight takes f6 check, king h8, queen f5 would lead to disaster for Sergei. So he played bishop takes e4, after which Wei Yi recaptured on e4. Again, all forcing, takes. When I talk about forcing loads, I'm talking about only moves, replies. And once again, we get a position where, actually here Sergei had two options. He has to do something about this bishop. How does he recapture? Well, in the game he played queen takes f6, but g takes f6 was another option. However, after the move knight to g4, c takes b2, and now let's say rook a d1, yes, black temporarily is 2 pawns up, and he's got this very important b pawn, but his king side has been completely shattered. And the knight, queen, and rook combo are very, very dangerous. So even here, any queen move away would lead to absolute disaster. White is just going to checkmate black very, very easily in this position. Sample line could be, takes, check, and, mate is going to be on the board. So this is impossible. There is one saving grace in the move pawn to f5. This is a very common idea. Distracting the queen momentarily and then playing the move bishop d4. But the truth is, putting your bishop in a pin like this without having c5 on the board is just very, very difficult to make from a human perspective. So Sergei no doubt looked at all of these lines and just thought he was getting mated after g takes f6, so opted for queen takes f6. But this runs into the very simple knight d7. And there's nothing black can do to stop losing the exchange. Sergei decided to go into the ending with queen g6. There's really nothing better. Queen takes g6, h takes g6, knight takes f8. He threw in the Zwischenzug, c takes b2, rook a b1, king takes f8. So the dust has settled after this huge forcing variation. It's clear this has just not worked out for Sergei Karjakin. He is an exchange down. He has got a pawn for the exchange and a good bishop on b6, but the problem with Sergei's position is A, his rook lacks activity from a8. So were the rook, for example, already able to come to d2, he would have more than sufficient compensation. And B, his bishop doesn't really have an anchor yet. So if the bishop could establish itself without really ever being able to be budged or compromised, then he could have a claim to building some kind of a fortress. But he simply doesn't have that. And the next move is one of my favourite moves by Wei Yi in the whole game, actually. A very, very precise move. A lot of players would just take on b2 here, take the pawn off and continue. But after rook d8, actually, though this might still be winning for white, Sergei gains some coordination in his position. So instead, Wei Yi shows patience and plays the move rook fd1. Brilliant move, making this rook as passive as possible. And from here, actually, he made it look easy. King e7 was played, rook takes b2 now, and g5. Well, Sergei has to do something. Now rook b d2 by Wei Yi, threatening to use the two rooks and come down to the 7th. Rook h8 was played, and now g3 by Wei Yi. Again, just a very nice move, gaining some luft for the king. Rook h5 by Sergei. Looks like a very odd move. The idea is that in some positions he wants to go g4 and activate the rook around along the 5th. So here Wei Yi played king g2 and Sergei played king f6. But now this idea of perhaps going g4 at some moment was completely ruled out. I like this move very much. Pawn to h3 by Wei Yi, making this rook passive again. Rook h6 by Karjakin, and now Wei Yi played rook d8. Again, this rook making it passive, not allowing it to return. And now White has a very simple idea. He wants to target the weakness in the black position, the pawn on f7. And there's not really much black can do about this. Sergei Karjakin tried king e7, a check was given, and he came back. And now Sergei played rook f6. Sergei could have defended a lot better, and it's something we actually expect from him, but I think it would have all been in vain anyway. Because now after rook g8, rook g6, rook e8 check, king f6, and now rook d7, actually in this position Sergei Karjakin resigned. A very quick loss for somebody like Sergei, who is such a fantastic defender. But there's simply no way to stop rook f8 and rook takes f7. And once that goes, everything else falls. There's really no point carrying on here. So this was a fantastic and very important victory for the wonder kid, Wei Yi, who, after the other results in the round, is, I believe, sole leader on 7 points from 11 games. Wesley So drew his game, so he's on 7.5. And in round 12, these two will face off against each other. So we're going to be in for fireworks in round 12. Wesley So with the white pieces. It's going to be difficult for Wei Yi to break down a player who's not lost in over 50 classical games against the world's best. But you never know. We'll see how Wesley handles the situation. In any case, today Wei Yi showed that perhaps this is his breakthrough tournament. Perhaps this is a tournament where, after years of talk, he finally shows that he truly belongs in the world's elite and plans to stay there. In any case, hope you've all enjoyed the video, and remember to catch me and Jan Gustafsson tomorrow on Chess24 at 1:30 p.m. Central European time for round 12. But for now, hope you've enjoyed the commentary today, and hope you've enjoyed this Game of the Day video, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow during the commentary.